the goal became break even, like somehow get to be in control of our own destiny. So we hit that almost out of necessity because we felt that otherwise we wouldn't be able to raise more money. And that was actually like a really liberating feeling. It was what I thought was like a way to survive to then raise more money ended up being like, hey, why do we need to raise more money? Like, there's
You were sort of forced into this position, but then it gave you freedom. Are you grateful for that period? Do you feel like you learned something? And if you had to do it again, I know you were forced into that position, but if you were to do it again, would you have bootstrapped through that period again? Would you have raised if you could have?
In hindsight, I think knowing what I know now, we learned a ton through that, right? But I think we spent too long thinking of that as a constraint. Like I think we could have done a lot more sooner to expand, not only to grow our customer base, but like build more of our product. I think in hindsight, it was a great experience to teach the company this like value of not just frugality, but like, revenue is like the way that you reflect customer value is by building something that people are willing to pay for, and it engenders a lot of more rational thinking around like the healthy mix of growth versus spending versus how quickly you're bringing value to customers, et cetera. I think in hindsight, if I had like a magic wand, I think I can see a lot of potential upside and like acceleration if we had raised our Series A instead of in 2019, maybe around like 2016 or something like that, where we already had that value of running lean and efficiently kind of engendered throughout the company, not just the founding team, but the leaders. But I think we constrained ourselves for too long to growing as fast as our revenue was growing, right? And had we had more capital earlier, I think it would have given us. You and I have used this phrase a lot, courage capital. It would have given us the courage that to take bigger bets sooner.
Yeah.
And that was like a time in the market that we were just running away with innovation compared to. Adobe had 3 different products in the space that they slowly shut down because we were doing so well. So I think that could have really accelerated our adoption in the market. That then would have been even more compounded by, the years of growth that we've seen since. Yeah.
There's a couple unique things about the Klaviyo beginning that I think I want to touch on. One is you didn't raise a lot of money. Klaviyo is mostly bootstrap. You kind of had a little bit of seed capital, but then you became very profitable very quickly. Was that intentional? Was that it just happened to work out that way? You don't like VCs? I mean, let's be honest here. Like, how did that happen, right? Because this is 2012. There's lots of venture funding around, right?
Yeah, I think for us it was a bit of both. So one, I had in my head that there were a lot of startups then that I felt like they'd raise, what felt like a lot of money at the time, like $1 million. Yeah. They'd build something, but it was never really a profitable, sustainable business. They'd get acquired, and that was like success. Yeah. And we wanted, my family, like my grandparents own, a small business, and it is profitable. It doesn't employ that many people, employs like 20, 25 people. Right. But it's real and it's durable. And I was like, okay, well, like that's a real business. Right. Like we should try to do that. And I also felt that if, advice I give anybody that has an engineering background is, that's really the hard part if you're building software. Right. I mean, the costs aren't all that high. Yep. And maybe it's a little different, like if there's some compute costs, like with, some of the ML stuff that's going on now. But by and large, like the costs aren't that high. Yeah. So if you can put in the sweat equity, like it actually gives you a lot more control. Mm-hmm. Over what you want to do. I talked to other, founders, in the Boston ecosystem and across the country, and you just hear these stories where it felt like they kind of feel like they got on a treadmill that they didn't know they were getting on when they raised investor capital, because all of a sudden it was okay. Well, we have to hit these growth targets, and we also like to do that. We're going to burn cash, and now all of a sudden there's a ticking clock, and maybe it's good because it forces you forward, but I feel like it creates some like unnatural behaviors. So for us, when we started, the idea was, I told Ed, I said, Ed was finishing up business school at the time. So I said, hey, Ed, like you're in the last 6 months of business school, and I had this vision in my head of business school, people don't do anything. I was like, you don't have classes or anything. So here, just come work with me every day. And let's see if we work hard for 5 or 6 months, like, can we get Klaviyo off the ground? And, Ed had wanted to do a startup too. Right. And our feeling was like, look, like if we end up fighting all the time, like that's fine. We'll quit and we'll go do something else. And if we can't figure out product market fit, then we'll go do something else. So we kind of felt like it wasn't so much, we were lucky to have, saved up enough, cash, enough savings from previous jobs that we're like, yeah, we can go a year and be okay. So we felt like, let's just give it a go. And then once you get some customers, we're kind of like, all right, can we get, what they used to call like ramen profitable? Can you get like a couple $1,000 a month where it's like the thing is self-sustaining? And so it took us 2 years to get to, I think it was like $250,000 in ARR run rate. And at that point we felt like, okay, this is like a real thing. And then it felt like, in some sense, like everything was flipped. Where now it felt like, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to grow, but now we could do it on our terms.
You were profitable at 250K.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, we weren't taking at some point we took, but at that point we were like, hey, we've actually got enough, cash left over. Like we start hiring people. I mean, for a long time, my, girlfriend, now wife, used to sleep with my phone by my bed and it would just be constantly buzzing because the servers would be breaking or something. And so she was like, wow, like you're going to have another engineer that like, at least you guys can rotate nights. So anyways, the reason we ended up raising capital at all, it got to the point where, you have a bank account for your company and, for us, it would go up little by little each day of the month. And then you'd run, you'd pay your server bill, right? And, eventually we'd run payroll and it would drop down, right? To almost zero. And then it would tick back up, right? And so the reason we actually raised, the seed round, our first round, was we just got tired of looking at that sawtooth pattern. We were literally, I have, engineers I want to hire. Yeah. And I'd be like, all right, so I'm going to make you an offer, but here's the thing. I can't hire you for another 4 weeks because I need a few more customers to come in the door. And then, and I kind of looked at it, we're like, well, that's kind of silly. Like we should just, we should raise enough cushion that we can. But the beauty then was
basically it was like working capital that you raised.
Yeah, well, actually another silly thing. We were bad at raising money. So when we raised that, I remember we closed it, and I remember telling the partner we were working with, John, saying like, all right, man, well, you just kind of wire the cash when you can. And he's like, oh, actually, is it okay if, we wire it in like 3 or 4 months? And normally it's like, hey, we need it right now. Now would be a good time to send it. For us, we're like, yeah, that's fine. Like, I think we closed it in February. We're like, yeah, sure. I mean, July's fine. Like, just, whenever you get a chance.
That's awesome.
So, it really was like a work capital for us.
Yeah. And looking back, are there things that you would have done differently if you had more capital, or do you think it kind of would have changed the trajectory in a way that?
Yeah, I think I'd say 2 things. Like, I mean, one, in retrospect, like I loved building and coding, and just gotten in such a groove, with Ed and I probably would have hired more engineers sooner. Because once we got up to 5 or 10 folks on the team, I mean, man, we really started cooking. But that was a shift for me because personally, I'd wake up every morning, I would answer all the support tickets, and I'd go code away for the evening, the afternoon, into the night, and that was just my routine. And it was actually different once we had employees, because it's like, oh gosh, okay, like well, what products are going to work? All of a sudden, the job is different. But I definitely would have done that faster. On the flip side, like I think one of the great things that bootstrapping forced is just it's like a lot of constraint. There are a lot of wonderful practices that got instilled into Ed, myself, and our team early on.
For a long time, we were just admirers of the product, but we had a friendly relationship, but it didn't really progress to the point of investment until the B2B product had launched and the SaaS app had launched, and you had moved to full subscription. And so the shape of the business looked very differently in 2018, 2019. Maybe take us to that point and when you started actually thinking about raising capital and what the reasoning for that was.
Yeah, so from the very beginning, we treated it like a business. And I have a saying, like I say, there's a difference between a user and a customer, right? And I always think of it as, if I go to my friends, my neighbors, whomever I meet and say, here's my idea, do you think it's great? What are they going to say? Yeah, great idea, great idea. If you go to them and try and sell it to them, you may get a very different reaction. So from the very beginning, listening to our customers meant actually having customers. They would pay for it. They would tell us what they liked, what they didn't like, and that's how we built 1Password and continue to build it today. But you can take that too far. Now, what it did mean is, through all this time, we were profitable. We hadn't taken funding, to your point. So, the bootstrapped experience is a really good one, for certain companies at least, right? And for us, and so up through 2018, 2019, we'd continued to grow, and I think we were about 150 people at the time. We had now, I think I'll say 20, 30,000 businesses that were using us on the B2B side. They were growing in sophistication. We were starting to grow in sophistication in the way of needing contracts and stuff like that. But we still didn't have a sales team. We still didn't have a marketing team. We were still very immature when it came to financing and HR and all of those sorts of things. And I said, it's time for us to grow and grow up. You can get a little too happy about being bootstrapped, maybe a little too proud if I were to, about bootstrapped, and it starts to hold your business back. And so I said, I want world-class marketing, I want world-class go-to-market, I want all of this, but how do I gain that? Well, you get world-class leaders to grow those orgs. Okay, fine. How do you grow, or how do you attract world-class leaders when a company like ours is so private, nobody knew if we had money or if we were growing or whatnot, because we had never been public, we never raised money. And so I always remember thinking, like, we don't need the money for our day-to-day operations, and that's certainly, you and I had that discussion, but now there was a need. Now this is a great opportunity for us to, and fully admit I will steal your term on this, like get some courage capital, some money in case we want to do things, whether it's acquire companies or whatnot, but also be able to go to the broader market and say, yep, this is us, this is a real company. And that A round, which I think was the biggest round at the time for Accel, was a great opportunity
Biggest
to do
Series
so.
A we've ever done. Still
Yeah.
to this day.
Raising money always has to be for a reason. Sometimes, of course, raising money is the reason. But to the extent you can, you've got to look at it and you've got to say, beyond the money, what is the value?